you. And with that, we're turning this over to Randi Thompson and Sue Hoyle, and they're going to introduce ourselves, and they've got an amazing program planned for us. So thank you, Randi and Sue.
Well, and thank you, Diane. I'll take it from here.
I can't hear you. You're on mute, Sue.
No, we can hear.
Yeah,
we can hear.
I don't think so. Okay.
Yeah.
We always have always a few technical difficulties, right? But as I was saying, my name's Sue Hoyle, and I'm delighted to be here as the moderator for our session. We've been calling it among ourselves a fireside chat, which isn't real appropriate given the weather we've had recently, but we do hope it reflects kind of the fact that this is more of a warm conversation between us about everything that Randi has been doing over the past 25 years. As Diane mentioned,
A long time.
Right. I'm a financial consultant, CPA, and I've been involved with Kidsave for the last 11 plus years, working on the audit committee, working on the finance committee. Since my background was heavy Big Four audit and M&A, along with, doing a lot of work with private and public and nonprofit companies, and then special pre-IPO consulting the last several years. So it's been, it's been a chance to kind of give back with some of that experience and leverage that experience, for the benefit of Kidsave. And in particular, it's been such a pleasure to work with Randi, she's been the CEO, co-founded this nonprofit 25 years ago to address the needs of older children adoption, the children that people just don't always remember and forget about. And Kidsave has done tremendous work in that area and recently branched into some other areas, which I think you'll find really intriguing. Kind of using that as a segue, Randi, tell us a little bit about, in your words, what prompted you to co-found Kidsave 25 years ago, and what type of journey you had moving from, a successful career in marketing and PR into a notprofit.
Some people say it was insanity, but I guess taking it back, I was incredibly fortunate in my early career that I worked with a small boutique marketing firm that, and I had a great mentor in Bill Novelli, who had a packaged goods marketing background and then decided he wanted to really tackle social issues. So I cut my teeth on that really early and had worked with some amazing people, worked on some great social change campaigns. So it's sort of in my blood, I think. But then as successful companies do, we got acquired and acquired and acquired and acquired. And I went from doing things like 3-year plans to 3-month plans. And I began to think that maybe I wanted to do something different. So first I transitioned into my own company with my co-founder at Kidsave, where we did social marketing programs and we did a lot of international work. And honestly, I never, ever in my entire life thought I would start a not-for-profit. That was not on the agenda, wasn't something I had ever wanted to do. And it really became something that once I got exposed to the issue of children growing up around the world without a family to call their own and without any connection, it became something that over time I just couldn't not do.
Well, that resonates with me, Randi, because when I first became familiar with Kidsave, I tried to give back over time, I think, as we all do.
And you have been an amazing volunteer. I just want to say you have been a terrific volunteer leader.
Well, thank you. But I've tried to give back to different organizations, but the Kidsave mission grabbed my heart and really made me just want to do as much as I could in any way I could. It kind of makes me think, what was it really about the issue of foster care and the older children adoption that first grabbed you when you were starting Kidsave back in the day? Because I think we all talk, there's so many issues in the world, so many things that children need. And we have so many issues here at home. And I know, Kidsave, everyone might not be aware, but Kidsave has a very international spin as well as a domestic spin. So
Sure.
how did that really come about, Randi?
Well, we started our work internationally really because that's where both my co-founder and my exposure happened. She adopted a baby in Russia and started telling me about the stories of these poor little babies that were in these cribs with nobody to hug them, hold them. And then while I was working on a project in Kazakhstan, I went to an orphanage. But I didn't go for little kids. I went for an orphanage that had older children. And I was absolutely blown away. I could not believe that so many children were growing up without a family. And for the older kids, they were so hopeless. There was nothing for them to look forward to. They were being sort of languishing in care, only to be dropped out on the street at 16 or 18. And originally, we tried to do some pro bono work, a little volunteering and find whoever was helping to get these kids into families. And there really wasn't anybody focused on this issue, and could not get them out of my mind, couldn't get those faces out of my head at night or when I woke up in the morning. And I think that for me, I'm an adoptive parent. So perhaps that was a bit more, made it, more real to me. My kids were 8 and 11 at the time that I started Kidsave. And I thought, this could have been them, but for the luck of the draw. And it just seemed like I had the skills and it was something I could really create change in. And that's why Terry Baugh and I started Kidsave.
Well, and once you kind of had the mission, what types of challenges did you find kind of moving from the corporate world over to the nonprofit world, which we all know has very different challenges?
Well, I had money to work with in the corporate world. That was a really nice thing about it. And even when I had my own firm, we still had, clients and we had funds to do the work. When we started Kidsave, we started it with nothing. We started it with a passion, a goal to change the future for kids without families, but we didn't have any money. And serendipitously, about the time I started Kidsave, I got a divorce from my first husband. And so people would say to me, "What are you, crazy? You've got 2 kids approaching their own teenage years and you're starting an organization like this? What, you must be nuts." But, you have that aha moment where you realize that, you go from, is that all there is, to I can make a real commitment, I can make a real change, and I can make a difference. And so I knew I just had to go forward.
Well, and is that part of what helped draw other people in to work with your mission and vision, to bring in supporters when you didn't have the money? Yeah.
Well, first, I think whenever you're starting something like this, I always tell people that they should actually start with a big fat endowment, which we didn't, of course. But the other piece is that we did what I think was intelligent. My mentor, Bill Novelli, joined our board. We brought in a long-term friend of mine, Peter Schwartz, who is a corporate attorney and who continues to this day to do all the pro bono legal work for us. We brought an accountant in. We brought a couple of key people who already knew and trusted us and believed in our vision as we, began to take it forward. And then we started talking to everybody, and we did market research. We got a name and a logo, and then we said, we got to tell people about this. And when we first started telling people, their eyes would kind of glaze over, because this is an enormous, enormous issue in society. It's a chronic disease of our world, that we have children that are growing up without families and are going to have outcomes that are terrible. But when you say to somebody, there's millions of kids living in orphanages and foster care, people's eyes just glazed over when we first started. And so we said, we have to make it personal. We have to make it about the kids. We have to let people really get to know them as individuals, as opposed to a piece of paper or, a collective group. Because what we wanted to do is to change the narrative on these kids. There were a lot of misconceptions. There were a lot of bad press about, children that were growing up in foster care, and we wanted for people to see them as individuals. So that was a really key thing. And then we talked about it, we amplified it, we talked about the children as people all the time. And as more and more people got involved, we had families that took children in, and they then became, some of our core supporters going forward.
Well, and it really makes a difference having those advocates, right?
Yeah.
But it also,
And the kids are advocates too. I mean, a part of our model has always been that our kids have a voice and a choice in what happens to them. And we build that empowerment in the kids. And so we have ambassadors today from, who are on my board associate group who were adopted from Kidsave, and they're championing other children's rights as well.
That's just so wonderful to hear. Looking at the events, of the world that have taken place this year, 25 years ago, you made a major pivot, from corporate to nonprofit. But when the war broke out earlier this year in February, I think this was something that, in talking with you, you felt was another time that you had to make a pivot, because the need for humanitarian aid was really so much greater than even the need for placement, of children out of foster care and the permanency. Could you tell us a little bit, Randi, about how you got started in Ukraine in particular, and what happened when the war broke out, and the way that Kidsave, you personally and Kidsave, reacted?
Well, first it was, I think we made an executional pivot. We never really pivoted from our mission, which is to keep children and families safe and together. So, it was a different way of executing it for sure. We'd already been in Ukraine for 6 years. We'd been working with in a corporate mentoring program with kids who were about to age out of orphanages, getting them workforce readiness, and we'd worked to place children and families. So I often feel like we were in the wrong place at the right time. We were working, in addition to working in Kyiv, we were working in two little-known regions, Mykolaiv and Kherson. People really hadn't heard that much about them. And then when the war started, the Russians attacked there first. And we also had 144 children that we had placed in families over the last couple of years. And our team in Ukraine called me and said, we've got to get these kids to safety. And so the very first thing we did was we moved those 144 kids out of those regions and further west in Ukraine so that they would be safe. And so those families could stay together. And then we realized that we had to do more. There were so many families that were being disrupted and so many children that were suffering that first thing we did was we took all the money that we'd allocated for expansion of our programs in Ukraine, and we immediately put that to play to purchase some vehicles, to get protective gear for the teams, and to really create a rescue center. And so it wasn't a lot of money. It was about $250,000. And we spent that in the first week. So, it was all gone. But we knew that we had to keep going. And so we continued to build, and we realized, we worried some that we were going to not have supporters come along, or that we were going to cannibalize from our core work. In the first month, our team was working 24/7, the entire team. And then, of course, that's not sustainable. So as we moved along, we said, we've got to let people know. We've got to make it personal. We've got to make it about the kids. We've got to make it about the families. We also have to let the world, both our supporters and the general public, know what's going on. And so we did that. And we're concerned that it would cannibalize from our core programming. And we kept our most of our team focused on our regular work to place children and families. And we added people. We brought back Tanya Stafford, who'd been working about half-time, and she came and worked, again, she's still working 24/7 on it, but we really deployed specific people, and we added new people in Ukraine so that we could keep our current work going. And our supporters came with us. It did not cannibalize from our work. Our regular program, our domestic program in Los Angeles and in Houston with foster kids are going stronger than ever. And, we have new people that have come along. So I'm glad that fear of, not having the support didn't stop us from doing it. My personality is that I won't take no for an answer. And I feel like, don't tell me I can't do it. But But we had an amazing team of people and such great volunteers in Ukraine who really stepped up to make an enormous difference. And so we just kind of went along with them and tried to facilitate everything to make sure they were successful.
Well, Randi, did you also have volunteers come from some of the surrounding countries, from Poland or other? Did people jump in?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We've had Americans. We have a couple of Americans that are deployed over there right now who are running our operation in Poland, which often gets supplies into Ukraine. And they're, Polish people, German people who come and, help with convoys to get things across the border. There was a time when there was such a fuel shortage that we were filling jerry cans to get them across the border and siphoning out of our vehicles and putting it into the rescue team's vehicles. So, there's been, I think it's the thing that makes you realize that when people feel they can actually make a difference, that they can do something substantive, that people step up. And we certainly saw that with the Ukrainian citizens. I've seen it obviously in my team that steps up every day for kids, but all around the world, people have stepped up here.
So amazing. Well, one of the things that I find really compelling is the montage that your team put together, Randi, to talk about kind of the first 6 months in Ukraine and what had happened. And
Sure.
We have Lauren kind of in the background from Kidsave that we thought we have a little 2-minute video that really encapsulates everything, the horror and the love and everything in between that was going on in these 6 months. So we're just going to show you this little 2-minute video because it says even more than we can.
And looking at that, Sue, I was thinking that you asked about volunteers from other countries. I think that the biggest thing that excites me is that, we have about 300 volunteers working on our effort at this point in Ukraine and neighboring Poland. But the Ukrainian people who were working with us in child welfare, who stepped up for this, but also just ordinary citizens. So we're excited about what that means for the future in Ukraine, that there's this huge volunteerism, sentiment that's growing. And we hope that's going to ultimately work for child welfare and placement of kids long term. People are seeing the responsibility they have to help that one other human being.
Well, it makes you think too when you see this video, Randi, that and I've seen this video more than one time. I've seen it multiple times, and every time it just grabs at my heart. But I think initially it also grabbed at the hearts of people around the world, and you saw an outpouring of, support, donations. And like most things, it tends to, the news, things go out of the top of the news. It's no longer the top story. People still care just as passionately, but you don't always see that translate, into the same level of donations. What do you see kind of coming? You mentioned some of what you've done, and the video talks about the first 6 months, but now that we're heading into colder weather and the war, unfortunately, looks like it's just going to keep continuing. Plus,
Right.
they'll be rebuilding after. What types of needs do you see changing for the people over there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. We had so much support in the early months. And we've spent, just to put it into perspective, a little over $2.5 million so far on our efforts in Ukraine. And we know we're going to need that much overall, until this war is over, at least. The first couple of months, people were just, looking for something they could trust, that they knew was actually getting the help to the people where they needed it. And so there were a lot of gifts that came into Kidsave for that, which went out the door as fast as it came in, obviously. That has certainly tapered off, and it's worrisome because the need is even greater now. You have so many displaced people that we were able to move them out of combat areas, and that they're moving, further west into Ukraine, and those people still need help. And then you have, winter's coming, and, Game of Thrones, winter is coming, right? But it really is. It's already started. The weather's turned colder in Ukraine. We have Russia controls 20% of the landmass of Ukraine right now. They still, even with the recent gains that have been made by Ukrainians, they still control 20%. And they control 28% of the winter crop. So it means that we've got to get storehouses full of goods for people so that we can keep them sustained through the winter. They're also continuing to bomb the electrical plants. And so, we're looking at just basic things like generators and flashlights, so that these children are not living in the bunkers without even any light or any heat. Those are all, really critical basic human needs that we need to make sure that as the troops are fighting, that we're able to, continue to support that. And so, we obviously need help with that. We're also looking, though, really forward. We're in this for the long haul. We were working in Ukraine through partnerships before the war, and we made the decision that we know to be part of the solution, we have to have a footprint there. So we were in the process of doing the final work to get our official, actual office established in Ukraine. And then as we look down the road, we're still doing child placement. We're still actually, helping kids to move into families while the war is going on, and we'll continue to do that. But this week, as we were trying to figure out how are we going to take this great volunteer effort that's going, and as you try to rebuild families and try to, move forward to keep families together post-war, or even while this war goes on, as people kind of say, I have to move on with my life to some extent. We were so blessed that this week there was a gift of a piece of land in Western Ukraine in the mountains. And we were trying to think, how are we going to get everybody together for training? How are we going to get some of these families and children, together to meet? And so there was a wonderful gift that was made in Ukraine for a piece of land. So we're looking to turn that into a Kidsave center, which would be for training of other areas in our model, which brings kids into the community where they can meet and get to know families. And then also for whatever emergencies occur over these next areas, if we have to take more children and put them into safety, that there'll be a place to actually house them. So it's a great gift. It's also a huge project because we're going to have to do tremendous renovation. We're going to have to put buildings on the land that will be able to house children, and facilities and kitchens and all that good stuff. So, that's a little bit of what we've got planned. We know that we're building our volunteer force in Ukraine, which is key to what Kidsave does. We always have been heavily leveraged by volunteers such as yourself, that we really need those people. And we're getting more and more of them in to be able to start really going back to doing programming as we can, move down some of the aid and rescue. But it's still going strong right now. We're going to have to do that. And we're trying to do some of it in tandem.
Well, Randi, when you mentioned, I was just thinking, as you talked about this piece of land, which maybe eventually will become a Kidsave orphanage or a place.
We're not into building orphanages, remember?
Well, yeah, not an orphanage, but a place for the children, to transition. But when you talk about, flashlights and the other things that they need, are most of these coming? I think you had mentioned to me that, the cost to ship these from the United States would be impractical. How is it working that you're getting the supplies and the medical goods? Is it from Europe that you're getting them and pulling those into Ukraine?
Originally, we were getting, there's certain things you have to get in the United States, protective black vests and things like that, armor for your trucks and the things to protect the rescue workers. Some of that had to come from the US, but for the most part, wherever we could, we try to buy local. We're trying to source what we can in Ukraine, because that helps to keep the Ukrainian economy buoyed up, and it provides jobs for people who are displaced. But a lot of the things were coming from Europe. Initially, much came from Europe. Poland in particular was where we sourced our food. But now, again, we're moving as much of that into Ukraine as we can. It's totally impractical to get things from the United States. And, people always want to send things and they want to send clothes. But by the time you ship them over, you have spent much more than you would to just procure them locally, either get them donated or procure them locally at a cost. So, for the most part, we're trying to get people to give, to give money, because just the logistics of transporting from the United States, take more time and money than its value, sadly.
Yeah. And so when you look at this land and, building a family placement center, let me use the right term, would likely be using, all local builders, local construction workers. And are those people, how are they able to keep their economy afloat in this environment?
Well, clearly the economy is not afloat as you would like it to be, because there's so many people that are, displaced, or they're living in combat areas. But that's a goal of ours, that certainly we would want to employ people locally to do it, local building firms. The more that you can, use Ukrainian labor to do this kind of thing is great. We're also one of the things that, we just got this gift, so we're visioning it, we're manifesting it, that it will, be a center within the next year. But one of the things that we do have planned is that we'll use some of the kids in our corporate mentoring program that'll provide them with amazing internships to be able to work in a facility like this, to be able to work in the kitchen, we'll be able to train some of the kids there as well. And then, of course, the big picture from expansion is that we want to be able to train communities to be able to take the model on, so that more kids will find families.
Do you feel that a lot of the children are going to find families inside Ukraine and Europe, or do you see some of them coming to the United States?
I never say never about anything, but right now, first of all, adoption is on hold completely in Ukraine. It's under martial law. They're not able to do adoptions. And so all adoption in the United States is on hold at this point. Our programs have always worked to try to find families in their own country wherever possible first. That is best practice. Is, kids have enough trauma that, making that move to another country is very challenging. So to the extent that we can find families for kids in their own country, that's what we're working to do in Ukraine. Having said that, we know that if a child cannot find a family in his own country, and we do this in some of our programming with Columbia, you have to keep working until you can find a child, a family, wherever that is. And so, we're not currently thinking of bringing children to the United States for the purpose of adoption. We're really working locally, but if that's what it takes to get a child, a family, ultimately, I think my team is open to anything. And our team in Ukraine is as well. They want to make sure that kids have the opportunity to thrive in a family.
Yeah. Well, and Randi, can you maybe share a little bit about how the programs, at least I'm guessing, are a little different for placement in Ukraine than Summer Miracles, Weekend Miracles over here? And I'm not sure everyone's, even familiar with what we do over here. Might be good to mention. And without a doubt, you have to adapt to the country and the war and the environment, for something that works.
Right. I mean, actually, the model is pretty much the same wherever we deploy it. It's the idea is that people are not thinking typically about older kids to bring them into their family. If they think about adoption, they're thinking about babies or they're thinking about younger children. So, and that's why when my co-founder and I first were exposed to the issue, we said, well, what's happening for the older kids? So we take children that people are typically not thinking of, who often on paper don't look so good because they've been in care for a long time. They've had a lot of trauma from, being ripped away from their families at an early age and then being in the system and moving around. And we bring them back in the community so that people can meet them and get to know them. We do that in the United States. We do it in Colombia. We do it in Sierra Leone. We do it in Ukraine. So, the idea is still the same, that you take children that aren't being thought of and you shine a light on them. You bring them back in the community. You show them as people. You make it really personal. And we champion each and every child. And that's the same model that we do in Ukraine or the United States.
Well, and I think that's what's been so successful is the children have an opportunity to get to know, potential
and a choice
parents.
And a choice. I mean, we are the difference in our approach versus what might be a typical child welfare approach is that usually a family is making a petition for adoption and the system matches them. In our program, kids and families come together at events, they get to know each other. Each event at the end, both the families and the kids are asked if they met anybody that they would like to get to know more. So our kids have a voice and a choice. They get to say who they'd like to spend time with, who they'd like to get to know better. And we believe that that makes a difference in their commitment long-term and their ability to trust. And, it's at their pace. They're getting to know, people slowly. And it's always about the child. It's always about working at their pace, making sure that they build that trust slowly.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I would think, though, it's compounded, when the difficulties that are, posed by war and that environment make a difference in what the children and the potential adoptive parents can do together, right? I would imagine, aren't they like volunteering more together than doing recreational things?
Yeah, I mean, but it's not about what they do. It's about the time together. We launched our Houston Weekend Miracles program during the pandemic, and people had to meet virtually for a year and a half. And we did with our LA program, we went away from live events for a long time during the pandemic itself. So it's the same thing with war. You have to adapt. Each time you just look, what do you have to do to get that major premise that create the opportunity for people to meet and spend time together? And, over the years, I think in our programs, when people have been taking kids, the other unique thing about our programs is that kids are allowed to stay in our families' homes overnights and on weekends. So they're getting a real opportunity to both get to know that family, but also get to know the people in that family. And, that's the hard part in war, obviously, but sometimes things move a little faster that way too, because people realize the urgency. And it's not stopping. It's not stopping families from stepping up. I will say that.
No, not at all. It, it brings to mind kind of, we might not have an official war like Ukraine here in some of the inner cities and the areas, but we have some of those same problems. And you had shared with me, I think the group would find it interesting also, how different it was 20 years ago in terms of the reaction locally to this kind of to the type of program that the type of programs Kidsave has today.
Sure.
And if you talked about those today, what it would be like versus 20 years ago, there was almost no interest.
Well, we started internationally, not because we were so brilliant, but because that's where we saw the problem initially. In fact, I had no idea that kids in this country were growing up and exiting care with the same outcomes as a third world country or an emerging democracy. When I started Kidsave, I really thought it's a huge problem internationally, but our problem here is equally bad. But so we started in Russia and Kazakhstan, and then eventually moved to Colombia, and then eventually moved to the United States. And the US is a very siloed child welfare system. And certainly in the early 2000s, it was more so. And we would not have been taken seriously as coming in with the marketing, but it was a really new concept. It was something very different than your typical child welfare, which is all about privacy. And at some point in a child's life, the right to privacy violates the right to have a family, because if people are not looking for this kind of a child, you have to bring the child back to them so that they can actually see that, yeah, I could parent this child. So when we first brought the idea that we would have what's called hosting programs into any child welfare, we were considered a little bit of the heretics and those marketing people. And we persevered. And today our model is really considered to be best practice for older children. It's become part of the child welfare guidelines in the country of Colombia, that all children over the age of a certain age are needing to go through this kind of a program, because that's the only way they're going to find a family. So it's perseverance and having success. We've had more than 15,000 children move into families. That has certainly helped to change the approach. In LA County, where we've worked since 2005, LA County doesn't do any events on their own for older kids. Kidsave does all those events. And many times social workers and the DCFS partners that we have feel that it's much better for a child to go through a program like this than to be just thrust into a new family without knowing them.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you had mentioned, Randi, during the pandemic, how you started the Houston office. And then, of course, now the immediate and near-term focus by necessities on Ukraine. But do you still look at going into other cities across the US?
In the United States, we're certainly very interested in expanding into many, many more regions. We're looking at several right now. We're willing to go in and train. We're willing to, put one of our people inside a community for a period of time to help a community get going. And we're looking at all kinds of options, because we know that this works. It works wherever we've deployed it. So, we want to get it out. And I need to do it fast, because I don't have that many more years. I've got to make this happen more quickly. So I'm ready to actually expand both domestically and internationally.
Well, and that kind of leads into the thought of a lot of people think about volunteering, and very often I think, they might feel like it takes a bigger commitment of time or money than they have. What have you done, Randi, to try to bring people in to help in the mission?
Well, I think that, the first thing, nobody has to, completely change their career and their life, when they start to think about volunteering, like I did. That's a big leap. It's a big leap. It's got to take a lot. But I think that, people need to understand that in my issue, a child who has no one can benefit so much from someone who would spend a day a month with them, or 2 days a month. Doesn't everybody have that for a child who has no one? You kind of think about, what are the small steps you can take you don't have to jump into something, but, volunteer for an event or volunteer to, again, in my area, to be a mentor for a kid. There's so many things that, people can do. And I think what you have to do, though, is find something you care about. This is
And
not
what
the
makes you
issue
feel
for everybody.
fulfilled too, right?
Yes, makes you feel fulfilled, something you're connected to, whether it's from a personal experience that you've had or just something that you really, feel passionate about. Because if you feel passionate about something and give a piece of your time, you'll find that you gain as much as you give. So that's what we try to provide for our volunteers, the understanding that they're making such a difference. And whatever time they have, we'll try to make the best use of it to help to change the life for a child. It's not for, my issue is not for everybody. Some people don't care about this issue. Hard for me to believe that people don't care about it, but I know I've found it over the years. So I think it really is that there is another side to your business card. You're not just a C-suite executive. You're not just, what else do you do that makes you feel fulfilled? Because my volunteers tell me that it's not that they've done something for a child, they've done something for themselves as well when they get involved.
And I know firsthand that feeling. And I think anyone that's been involved with Kidsave has walked away, saying.
And so that's the other thing. Some people want to get involved with kids. Some people want to get involved in helping an organization like ours to be better, to manage better, to think. I'm looking for leadership always on my board. I'm looking for people who can help us to plan bigger, help us to scale up, help us to expand. And these are the kinds of things that C-suite executives are perfect for, because they've got that good business experience. And I think for me, when I started Kidsave, I said we didn't have any money, but I had business experience. And so we ran it like a business. And, having people that with the kind of skills that the C-suite membership has, it's for my organization or any not-for-profit is so valuable. It's so valuable.
It's almost as much or as little as you can give, right?
That's right. That's right. Take it in little bite-sized chunks, but beware if you get involved with Kidsave. We're very insidious. We get you in a little bit, and suddenly you're involved in lots of things, as you well know.
That is so true. Well, and I know one of the other things that you and the board are facing is that, now that the Ukrainian war is still continuing, how do you keep attention on it, or what can you do differently to maybe make people aware of the issue and the fact that I think you'd mentioned, Randi, the number of children you're feeding this week could triple within the next month or two.
Right. Yeah, we're feeding on an average 35,000 people a week. And, it's not just the feeding. We work as much as we can to get some donated supplies from other organizations, but we still have to bring it to them. We still have to get all this to them. So the need is huge. So we're always looking at ways to, for want of a better word, keep it fresh. We try to keep it personal. We try to keep it about the kids. We try to let people know that this is still going on and that, there have been some gains made. And so we need to keep the pressure and we need to keep the support going. But we're also looking at, what are the other ways? And I'm going to turn that to you because you actually brought me a great idea.
Yeah, so
you might want to talk about that.
I will mention a little. One of the things that we're planning to do different this fall, actually we hope in a few weeks, is we're going to launch an NFT. And I think many of you on the call might or might not be aware that over the last few years, this has probably been the single biggest differentiator for charities in bringing money into them, for two reasons. One, it's kind of new and different, but it's linked to the mission and the goals of the organization. But secondly, very appealing to both a younger generation and sometimes men, women who are more in the tech side,
Tech savvy,
who don't always look at an organization like this and immediately click on it and look for it. But the NFTs, being kind of akin to a digital baseball card, it's really just a different way to donate to the organization.
Right.
Instead of getting, a tote bag or a baseball cap with the logo on it, you get the NFT. But we're hopeful that this will show that Kidsave is progressive and looking, outside the box and doing what even some of the big charities in the US have embraced very slowly. I think in most cases, having done some research and been involved with a few of them, a lot of times the NFT or the funds came to them. The organization itself, the nonprofit, didn't initiate it or seek it out. So we're going to be the little guy kind of doing something that actually some of the bigger organizations, Save the Children, United Way, UNICEF, are slowly dipping their toe in the water, although many of them have received millions and millions of dollars by virtue of NFTs. So having said that, Diane, it might be interesting to get a little reaction from our group.
And C-Sweet's very involved in this because C-Suite
Yes.
is helping us to launch this, which is
Yes.
really grateful. We're
Right,
grateful to
right.
Diane
So
and Beth.
so I'm just curious as to, does anybody on this call, maybe a little show of hands on the bottom, does anyone here, anyone ever purchased an NFT? Let's ask that. Okay, that's one, but we've got the little hand thing on the bottom there. Just curious. Does everybody know what an NFT is?
We could be your first if you haven't. See, you could each go out a little
James
square
knows, yep.
on an NFT on
Sandy.
the grid to help our center. It'll be perfect.
Yeah. So we're going to be partnering with Kidsave on this because we're all on this learning curve together, and everyone's talking about NFTs. Starbucks did one, so why shouldn't Kidsave with C-Sweet? So we're going to keep you posted on that journey. So can we open this up to questions? Do you have more, Randi and Sue? Because this was just so impactful and meaningful. And I know quite a few people made donations, while you were talking.
Oh, that's
and
lovely. Thank you.
This.
Well, I had noticed that, and I had noticed there was a number of people in the chat, and that's why we were thinking, let's give them a
Right.
chance
So why don't we take the chat, and if everyone can come back on camera, it would be appreciated just so we can see everybody. After this, after we take some questions, we're going to open this up for a round robin of what did you learn, what did you take away, and who are you, and what's your business? Okay, so do you want to take a question from the chat, Sue Hoyle, Sue and Randi?
Let's see.
Chats. What do you have, Sue?
Well, I know that some people were expressing just their support and how much they appreciated what Randi and Kidsave were doing. But it also seemed like people might be curious too as to what might be happening that's different. Randi, one of the things you'd mentioned when we talked about the NFT initially, and we thought, you usually start, if you think of it as a digital baseball card. So again, it's a way to bring donations that we'd have varying amounts. And then we asked Randi, what do you need? And Randi started saying, what, a semi truck, or to deliver supplies around Ukraine that might be $40,000. We started thinking, down the what can we do that's different? Would we focus on, this is an NFT, for $25 or $50. It can feed a family of 4 for 2 weeks or for a month, versus it's going to be part of this truck that is needed, so desperately. So I think, could you mention, Randi, some of those other things? I know you talked about the generators and the flashlights that would be needed by the volunteers as we go into the, Game of Thrones winter.
Sure. Well, I said, I'm very focused right now on this piece of land that we're going to turn into the center. And I'm thinking it would be great for the NFT to have one of those grid programs where you, in an NFT, you can buy a piece of it. So like you're buying
Like a Super Bowl pool.
a brick, like a brick, your own little brick. That could be really, but that's going to be a big need. The tractor trailer is because we're feeding 35,000 people a week, and transporting in our small cargo vehicles is really not so efficient. So they're looking to get something that will transfer. Tanya, what is it? 24 tons each trip?
Yeah, well, they're rethinking now, and that's probably will be a 10-ton track because it's easier considering the road conditions, etc., and it's just more efficient. So
this is Tatiana
So-
Stafford, by the way. She's a colleague
Yeah.
of mine who's been working on our Ukraine program for the last 6 years and has really been leading the efforts on our entire rescue and evac effort. She coordinates with our Ukrainian team at all hours of the day and night. And it's really just been amazing to make this effort a success.
Randi, how many vans do we have now in our fleet? We started with a couple, right? And
We started with the personal vehicles from our team leaders who were running our programs, and one cargo vehicle. And at one point we were running about 65 different trucks. We own, Tanya's at 18 big 22 passenger, and we own a couple of 65 passenger vehicles, but we're running about 50 at this point, right?
it's a little less now, but we purchased 13 mini buses, one big bus, and 3 cargo vehicles for now. And some of them it's just free or very low lease.
And so now we need this enormous semi tractor trailer to be able to, as the need shifts, we've been trying to shift with it. We're trying to pivot from just taking people out. Now more people want to stay and hunker down, but they can't get food and they can't get medicine. So we're trying to bring as much in as we possibly can to them. So that's why we need the big semi.
And because we also have free warehouses now, so we have capacity to store a lot of food and supplies as well. And that's why truck would be very efficient, especially considering how difficult to get fuel and how expensive it is.
Right. Getting across Ukraine is, the roads have been so damaged that it's really,
That's what I
really
was
challenging.
Yeah.
But, that's when we were talking about how you pivot, we originally were renting warehouse space in Poland. And, now we have warehouses in Ukraine as well that are being able to, store the things as we get ready for this long winter ahead.
Do fuel costs present their own kind of challenge, or do you have a source of fuel locally?
Ted, why don't you take that one? Ted is, he has the great honor of taking our, trying to consolidate all the receipts that come in for all this fuel, and we're trying to figure it out. But what are we spending a month? I know we were spending $100,000 a month on fuel alone for a while.
Let's see. Well, first of all, great job, Randi and Sue. I'm just pulling it up right now, actually, because I was getting ready to run to a Salesforce conversion meeting. Let's see. The gas in general, we've spent as much as, like Randi said, $250,000 within the first, say, month. But in general, you're probably looking at, well over $100,000 in a given month since then, even though the initial rescue efforts were condensed within a period of about 2 months. We're still, and then it went into more humanitarian aid, and now we're really more moving back into that balance of rescue and humanitarian aid that Randi described. So that ongoing need is going to be real, and you're looking at least $250,000 every month between all of those things. So it's a real cost, but it's saving lives. It's hard to put a number on that. So, and the work that, as Randi said, the team is doing, both on this side and on that side, has been quite amazing. And I really do apologize, but I actually do have to go.
Nice to see you.
Well, it's for the
Sorry to
benefit
put you on the
of
spot.
Kidsave, so
It's okay.
thank you, Ted. Yeah.
Great job, everyone. Bye-bye.
Well, Randi, thank you. Randi, when you mentioned that Ted was tallying up lots of receipts, essentially, do all the teams just kind of keep track of what they spend it on, or how much food they're using, so that both to help you plan, but also to help document, what happened. What things
Yeah,
were
we're advancing a lot of, and one of the reasons, of course, we're going to have an office and a bank account in Ukraine soon, which will help. But we've had to transfer funds in very, very quickly, and so we're conscious. Obviously, we know that Sue's on our audit committee, so she's already asking me 2022 audit questions. I can feel it. We talked to our auditor right away as we were saying, we've got huge amounts of money going out, and then we get receipts back in, and we allocate them to the expenses. But I explained to the auditor that this money was going out in such a fast fashion, and it wasn't going out in traditional ways because the banks weren't working often, and so you were having to deal with transferring cash sometimes, and it's just a matter of documentation. And so that's a huge part of what you have to do, because we are fiduciary responsibilities. We're fiduciary responsible for this money that our donors are trusting us with. So we want to make sure that we're able to report back to them exactly how it's used. And one of the nice things about money that goes to Ukraine and to any of our programs really is that we're able, because we have a wonderful group of donors that are called the Guardians. And these are people that have been with us a long time and who believe in our work, and they contribute to us in an unrestricted fashion that is to be used for our operations and our fundraising efforts and things like that, which allows us to be able to take 100% of the donations that come from the general public and put them directly to programs. So if someone gives to us to go to Ukraine, 100% of that is going to go directly to this work in Ukraine. And we're lucky that we have that, but it's really important because people want to know that it's going directly to help.
Well, and I think, Randi, isn't that why CNN and local news channels, national news channels reached out and featured Kidsave as like one of the credible organizations that people could feel comfortable making a donation?
Well, I think there was a lot of, and when the war first started, clearly, and there's always graft and corruption in war, as you know, sadly. But people were looking for where they could give funds and feel like it was actually getting to the people. I mean, one of the things that I'm very proud of in terms of Kidsave's work and our team is that in the efforts, particularly the humanitarian aid, there's a lot of that stuff goes out, it ends up in supply depots, and sadly, sometimes it gets it back out on the open market. And so we have we have a volunteer chain that goes all the way down into the regions and the villages so they can actually deliver it to the people who are in need. And I think that I credit Lauren Davis and her team. My communications team is on here. Lauren and Milan and Chloe. They've worked really hard to make sure that people can see where the things are going, that the actual people who need them are getting them. And I think that certainly made a difference for us.
Yeah, well, and I think going forward, it will continue. Diane, were you giving me a high sign, or was I?
No, I just want to say, you know what? First of all, that was such a meaningful and impactful program. I would really like to thank Randi Thompson, who is the CEO, president, and co-founder of Kidsave, and Sue Hoyle, our C-level financial consultant, part of C-Suite, and on the executive committee